Out of the Attic on 91 FM has all of your favorite old-time songs in one place. Hear music from Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Dinah Shore, and many more. Join Nathan Randall from 6 to 8 p.m. for an evening drive down memory lane, only on 91 FM.
Welcome once again to Out of the Attic. Nathan Randall here with you, and right now I've got Bruce Belland from the Four Preps. And Bruce, how's it going today?
It's going really fine. It's nice talking to you, Nathan. I've been looking forward to this.
Now, Bruce, you are the lead singer from the Four Preps, and you have been since 1954.
Yeah, don't do the math out there, everybody. I don't want you to know how old I am. No, I don't make any bones about that. I just turned 75, and I'm still having a lot of fun.
So that would put you in the graduating class of about 54 then?
55, winter 55 from Hollywood High. Yeah, we formed in 54 for a talent show at Hollywood High, and then all graduated in 55, went on to UCLA, but we weren't there very long before we got our first hit, and goodbye college and hello the road.
What is your musical background? I noticed that you had just mentioned that you guys kind of formed a group for a talent show, and I've heard a little bit about that, but how did that actually come about?
Well, I sang my father was a preacher, and for the first 10 years of my life before we moved to Hollywood, I grew up in Chicago, where my father not only had a very large congregation, but was on the radio every Sunday. So at 4 years of age, my father promised me if on the next Sunday's broadcast I would sing Irving Berlin's new song, God Bless America. This was 1940. I was 4 years old. That he would give me my very own stick of chewing gum. So that was a big deal. When I had a brother, we used to get a half a stick each when they'd give us any. So I practiced with my mom all week. She was a vocal coach and so forth, and I practiced with her all week and sang my solo on Sunday and went through without making a mistake and got my stick of chewing gum. I just fell in love with singing from that day forward. My mom worked with me all through my younger years, and when I got to high school, I, of course, tried out for the school choir at her insistence, and I got into the school choir, and there were three other guys in the choir who, like me, loved singing and loved all the groups that were popular at that time. And along came this annual student talent show when we were seniors, and the school bulletin said 35 girls showed up yesterday to audition for our annual talent show, but no boys. There's got to be some boys out there that could do something. So I went to three buddies of mine in the choir and said, wow, 35 girls and no guys, I like those odds. Let's put a group together. So literally overnight, we went down after school that day and bought a couple of records from the local record store by the Crew Cuts and the Four Lads, and we went home and memorized the records off the recording, and went back and auditioned the next day and got on the talent show. And probably because we were the only boys on the show, we really went over. We were a huge hit, and that started it. So the next thing we knew, we were performing at proms and all over the place. That's how it all began. So I started singing at 4, and then in high school made it official with these other three fellas, and we named ourselves the Four Preps, and that was the start of it.
Where did the name the Four Preps come from?
Well, we were to do two songs in the talent show about 20 minutes apart. So introducing us for the first number, the student body president, who was the MC, didn't know what to call us. We didn't have a name yet, and so he said, well, here they are, the Bruce Belland Quartet. Well, that didn't go over very well with the other three guys. They shot me a look. They thought it was my idea. I hadn't said anything. But we did the first number and came off stage, and as soon as we got off stage, one of the guys said, look, we got to think of some kind of name besides the Bruce Belland Quartet before we do our next number. And there had been a play in the auditorium the night before, and one of the props was a newspaper which was sitting on a table nearby, and it happened to be open to the sports section, and there was a headline that said Preps Sports Result, which of course were all the high school football scores. So one of us spotted the word Preps, and so we talked to 4 grads, the 4 students, whatever, and 4 scholars, whatever, and suddenly there was the Preps in the newspaper headline, and somebody said, how about the 4 Preps, and that was it.
Who were some of your musical inspirations growing up?
Well, certainly the Mills Brothers. My dad, like many dads, was gone during the war, and the Mills Brothers were so popular with songs like Till Then, and a lot of the very romantic songs about being apart and someday we'll be back together again. So I grew up listening to Mills Brothers. My mom played them a lot. I also liked a lot of the choral groups that I listened to, Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians and some of those groups. And then the biggest influence, without question, on me once they came along in 1947 was the Four Freshmen. who recorded on Capitol Records that were discovered by Stan Kenton. And they were a big influence to me. I got to be friends with them later on because we were on the same record label in subsequent years. So I'd have to say the Mills Brothers, certainly the Four Freshmen, some of the great choirs like Fred Waring. Then slightly later in the early 50s, the Four Lads, the Four Aces, the Four Coins, which is why we had four in the name. That was quite the rage at the time. So I'd have to cite all of those as influences.
And Bruce, will you talk about your big hit, 26 Miles, the song about Santa Catalina? Where did that idea come from?
Well, the funny thing, Nathan, is that when I wrote the song, I had never been to Catalina. And people say, well, then, how could you write about the palm trees and all that? Well, the explanation is sort of interesting. The first 10 years, as I say, we lived in Chicago, and I was, like all the kids in my neighborhood, a dyed-in-the-wool Chicago Cubs fan. They were my team. And every spring, I should say, the Chicago Cubs were all transported out to this little island called Catalina off the coast of Los Angeles because the man that owned the Cubs, Wrigley, the chewing gum magnate, Wrigley also owned Catalina Island. So he thought it was a good idea to take them out where it was warm. So in April, we'd go to the movies and watch the sports newsreel during the movie, and they'd show my Chicago Cubs working out somewhere where, even though it was freezing outside in April in Chicago, there were my Cubs on this beautiful tropical island with palm trees in the background in short sleeve shirts throwing a baseball around. And I remember thinking to myself, wherever this Catalina place is, I got to get there someday. That looks really wonderful. So one day, a bunch of my buddies and I from Hollywood High, we cut class. It was a real hot, steamy day, and we grabbed our towels and our ukuleles and our surfboards and headed to the beach. And after surfing for a couple of hours, we were laying around in the sand, and there was Catalina off in the distance, and somebody said, wow, there's Catalina. Somebody else said, how far is it anyhow? And then somebody else said, 25, 26 miles, something like that. So I grabbed my ukulele and started to write a little 26 miles across the sea and sort of mess around with it. And that was the start of the song. So I'd work on it every now and then, wrote a little bit now and then. And finally, when we started to record for Capitol and we hadn't had any hits yet, we'd had 6 or 7 releases that hadn't hit, one of the other fellows in the group said, do you know that song about Catalina that you play now and then? Wonder if we could dust that off and take a look at it and turn it into a full-fledged song. So that's exactly what we did, and there we were off and running.
Other than being a Cubs fan, was there anything else that brought you to that island or made you think about that, or was that just
I think
something
just,
that you had thought about?
Laying around the sand that day, and there it was, and it's kind of romantic off of, you can see it across the water. It's a lovely little island, and it just sort of sparked my imagination, and I thought of every romantic image I could think of, beautiful girls and palm trees and water all around it and so forth, and just started to work on it. And then, in a year or two later, when we were looking for stuff to record and decided to try and make a song out of it, and we expanded it with some more romantic images and a couple of bridges and some other verses and so forth. But the inspiration was just, I think, laying on the beach that day and looking at this beautiful little island in the distance.
What are some of the other hits that we may not know from the Four Preps?
Well, we had the follow-up to 26 Miles, interestingly enough, internationally at least, was a bigger hit than 26 Miles Call. I was a big man yesterday, but boy, you ought to see me now. Once we got 26 Miles up and on the charts, our producer at Capitol said, okay, well, you got a hit, but anybody can get a hit. Can you get a second one? Can you get a follow-up hit? That's what's going to determine your longevity in this business. So Glenn and I, the fellow with whom I wrote 26 Miles, sat down and began to think of ideas for songs. And at that time, on college campuses, the big expression was he's a big man on campus, big man on campus. So we grabbed the expression big man and tried to figure out how to put a song around that, and then decided that what would appeal to all the little teenage girls who buy records is if some guy says, I was a big man yesterday, but since you left me, I'm nothing. The only thing that made me big was you. So we wrote that up and recorded it, and that sold over 1 million as well. And then we took the old English folk song Down by the Station Early in the Morning and wrote a song about that and the fellow's relationship with his girlfriend and so on, and that did very well for us. And then we had Lazy Summer Night, which was from a movie at the time, and then we had Gidget, which was the title song of the movie with Sandra Dee that we were in. So those are some of the more popular. And then what really put us on a different plateau in terms of the industry was we did a song called More Money for You and Me, which just said tongue-in-cheek, if you get rid of all the other groups and put them in the Peace Corps and send them around the world to remote spots, there'll be more money for you and me. And that was all the imitations we did, the parodies and comedy impressions, and that did very well for us. So those are some of the more popular stuff.